Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Joel Elston here. Today is Thursday, May the 17th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happy for the day. And welcoming Joel back. We only get him once a week, but it's always one good day a week. So, Joel, glad to have you back.
Always good to be here, Walt. Love my Thursdays.
I love them too. And we actually get you 2 times next week because Cindy's not going to be available next week. So we're going to get you on Wednesday, which is great. So double the Joel.
That's the maximal, the maximal allowable amount of Joel. It's 2 a week.
Oh, is that right? I don't know. I think I could tolerate a lot of it.
Yeah. So things are really good here. We've had actually had a little rainy weather the last several days. So I think everybody on the East Coast has had some of it. But they say we need it, so I'm good with that.
It actually knocked the podcast off a couple days ago. Wendy and I
were
we were in the middle of the podcast, and we were talking about how there was a tornado warning in the area. And I was doing my weather thing, trying to keep the tornado away. And I joked with her yesterday that I just wasn't specific enough with my request because I did keep the tornado away. It went south of us. I just forgot to say keep the power on.
Well, I mean, it's hard to anticipate all of that.
This is true.
You can't, it's one of those things. It's almost like there's been great novels and philosophers talk about, you accomplished that, but here's what happened. It's like, oh, okay. So I'm glad that hopefully we'll make it through the entire hour, and our goal will be to keep power on the entire hour.
I think we will. Yeah, it's going to be a good day for that. Yes. No doubt about it. Because we're resilient here. That we hold up under any circumstance. Doesn't matter what the circumstances.
See, that's a perfect lead into our topic today. So we got there in an unexpected way.
There you go. So, the topic is actually something, once again, that came from your Facebook feed. And where did you get that one from? Because it looks like it was one of those pass-around things.
Actually, the dandelion one, I mean, I looked it up. I thought about dandelions, and I have one that was growing in a crack in my driveway. And I'm looking at that, and I'm going, and that sort of led me to start searching for the resilience of dandelions or what have you. And so I found it, but I look at it, and by a lot of people, a lot of people will view dandelions as a weed. And I guess as they are, I mean, people spray for them and they're worried about not having them in the yard. But if you really look at the resilience of the dandelion, I mean, it sort of represents what life should be. I mean, it will grow in the crack in your driveway. You can poison them, and they just keep growing. They're amazing. They're resilient. They're a flower. I think they're pretty. I mean, I think they're bright. They bring a lot of sort of a color to a yard at times, even though they may be perceived as a weed. But it's sort of an analogy to me that's what we're talking about with the law of attraction. Is about resilience. It's about no matter what life throws at you, you can't control a lot of the stuff, but you can control your perspective of it. Again, the dandelion doesn't care that it's growing in between a crack in my driveway. It doesn't care. It's growing. It's doing its job. It's what it does. And that's it's amazingly inspiring to me when I look at examples in nature, despite all the energy and effort to rid the world of dandelions, they're proficient in just being. And you look at an orchid, which is absolutely beautiful. Try to keep an orchid alive in your yard for about a week. You can have all the attention paid to it. You can do it it's just random. It's very fragile. It's beautiful, and I'm glad that they're out there, but they're not resilient. They're very easy to kill. They die for no reason. Too much water, too little water, too much light, not enough light. It literally operates in a tiny area that it can survive, whereas a dandelion is incredibly resilient. And that's what the law of attraction gives us, Walt, is the ability to look at whatever has been thrown our way and move forward. I actually am listening. The book that I'm listening to right now, and I forget the name of it, tells you how well I'm listening, but the concept that the gentleman was talking about today is they did a study of valedictorians from high school.
Okay.
And they followed them. I think it was 81 was the number of valedictorians they followed over a period of, say, 15 years after college. And 95% of them graduated college with their average GPA of about 3.6 in college. Really good, very successful.
Sounds about right.
And then they're seeing how they translated in life. And while they were doing okay, most of them were staunchly in the middle. They were working in companies and they were conforming and they were doing everything they needed to do. But none of them were what that you would consider wildly successful. Most of them were making middle-of-the-road incomes for professionals. And again, I'm not minimalizing that, but they were living within the expectations very firmly on a graph in the middle. And that was the expectations of that group. And they were living up to expectations. And the researcher extrapolated from the information, his what he got out of that is, while it was valedictorians weren't always the smartest, they were best at conforming to what the school wanted you to conform to.
Very true.
And that was the difference. And since schools don't often teach, some do, but not many often teach how to think, they tell you what to think. And so when you get it, and the translation of that into real life is often lost, because the concept of being able to adapt at the unexpected, to not always follow the rules, to screw up and then fix it. The idea that, they have this very steady life, this valedictorian, is great. It's wonderful. I'm happy for them, because that's obviously what they're seeking. But to go out there and be that outlier, the one that screws up horribly and comes back, the one that's not afraid to fail, the one that does fail and comes back from it, those are the ones that you find become wildly successful. Most people who are in that upper 1 or 2% of income, if you really look at their background, there's a lot of failure there. There's a lot of willingness to go beyond the traditional thinking. And that's exciting to me. If I look at, I love people who bust their butt in life and then pull themselves up. It makes them more resilient. It makes them more like the dandelion. I am going to survive, and I'm going to grow from, in a sense, my genetic engineering is going to be improved because of what I go through. Instead of being the victim of things, I am now the active participant in my own success. I'm going to recover from what life does to me. And that's the beauty of what the law of attraction brings to us. It tells us our perspective remains completely in our control, period. Nothing else is needed. And that's exciting. That's what gets me up every morning. That's what I do in life. And that's why, I can talk about it for 45 straight minutes, so I'll shut up for a second. But yeah, that's what we do.
I know it is. It is, and it's great. I have to say, if it wasn't for the fact that it's actually a pretty looking flower, we probably would have had a 1950s B movie on the subject of invasion of the dandelion by now. But we haven't had that, and I think it's because it's a good looking flower. So that kind of saved it.
It is a good looking flower, yeah. And the difference between that and the orchid is orchids are considered so much more beautiful. The dandelion is the standard beauty. The orchid is the exotic beauty, and it translates to me in a very uplifting sort of life lesson. It's sort of it's what life does for us, and I love that whole ability to look at it that way.
What is it that you think is what is it about dealing with hardship, dealing with failure, that makes that resiliency turn into success? I mean, what's the law of attraction side of it, do you think?
Well, my belief is the law of attraction takes us to that place of, I get to view, we deal with this. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago about blame being a thing, mm-hmm. or responsibility or blame. I think the law of attraction tells us life will bring you unexpected events. And that's your focus. You can have a positive attitude and you things are going to happen, but your thought and response, what you vibrate on a daily basis in response to what happens, is the law of attraction. You know, I often share, when with people and on this show, I talk about my son TJ passing away. The example of that is it's a horrible loss to lose a child. It's the worst thing that can happen in anyone's life. But my response to that was, I am going to either be destroyed by his death or I'm going to be uplifted by his life. I'm in charge of that. And that's what makes me successful, is I'm able to see life happens and I'm in charge of my response to that. When I lost my job at a as a treatment center, as a director of a treatment center, it was like, oh my gosh, I just lost my career, is how I could view it.
Right.
Or look at this incredible opportunity now is afforded to me that I can move on to. And I would never go back to that other job, not because of any other reason than that was part of my progression. I'm grateful that I lost my job because it put me in this situation today that I'm in. I have the career of my dreams. I do what I want to do. I have sort of manifested a life, and my response to it came from what a lot of people would view as horrible traumas or tragedies and stuff. And while I'm certainly not saying my son's death isn't a trauma or tragedy, my response to that every day of my life remains in my control. And so things will happen. And I have a colleague that I've helped work through this. She left a really important job. I mean, she had a job she was a wellness coordinator for a private school. She's an incredibly talented lady, and she had been there for years. And she wanted to sort of get into a different field. She's very much into sort of addiction work, and she wanted to do some work there. Well, she left the job of many years and went to work for a facility that actually failed or is in the process of failing. And now she left her career and she had to leave. She didn't fail. The company failed. She had to leave the failing company. And she's like, oh my goodness, I made a really horrible choice. Well, through some thought processing and viewing it, she's now back in that position with the school she left, in a much better role for her. She's only working a part-time job there at an increased rate of pay, but she's also freed up to do the other stuff that she's passionate about doing. She said it almost happened in a way that makes so much sense. And I said, yes, but you were looking at it as such a loss. And in reality, it turned out to be such a gain. It moved her so much forward from where she was at. She's really appreciated where she's at now. She's really cutting edge in her field, and now she's getting the recognition for that. A lot of that is just simply perspective, Walt, and that's what the law of attraction teaches us. Everybody goes through turmoil and trauma. You're either going to be destroyed by it or strengthened by it, and it isn't some imaginary force making it happen. It's you and your perspective that makes that happen.
And as much as I have come to appreciate that and learn that it's true in my life, I'm still amazed by that. I mean, there's a part of me that keeps asking myself, how on earth could it be that the perspective makes such a difference? It doesn't make any sense, and yet it seems to.
Well, and that's where the law of attraction picks up on. If I'm a failure, and I'm viewing I am a failure, and I will continue to fail, and if my vibration, and this is the law of attraction, if my emotional vibration is that of failing, and that's all I'm doing, then that's what the law of attraction fills the void. Okay, this guy clearly loves failing, so let's give him a lot to fail about. But if I look at it like this guy uses failure as a tool, this guy's going to keep, we're going to keep, he has moved forward. And so the law of attraction fills that void too. It simply responds the way you do. I look at every failure as me busting my ass and trying. So if I'm trying hard enough, I failed, I'm going to learn from that. So I succeed from it. I view every failure as a success eventually. It's not giving up. That's how I view it. So that makes me more resilient. I don't quit when I fail something. I move forward. I adjust. I do what I need to do. If I try the same thing 19 times and it doesn't work, say, okay, maybe I need to adjust what I'm doing a little bit.
This is true.
But I'm not going to quit. and that's and I've watched that in your life, and I watched that in a lot of friends' lives, a lot of clients' lives as well, where when you adjust that perspective, that's all that's needed. It isn't some magical force at work. I think the law of attraction is just like gravity. You can view it as magical. I just view it as a law. It's what happens. It's your success. You look at you hear anybody that, I was listening to J.K. Rowling talk about success and how she failed time and time again, and how now she's wildly successful, and just can't really, everything she touches, and her response to a question, one of the people questioning her said, you're so lucky. Mm-hmm. And she laughed, and she said, well, I guess from your perspective, it would appear lucky. She said, but when I was failing and homeless and had no food to eat, you weren't be calling me lucky then. It's just my perspective of what was happening changed. I knew my direction. I knew where I was going.
Which is a powerful thing. I mean, because so many of us, I've gone through large chunks of my life not really having a clear idea of where I wanted to go. And I knew that wasn't a good thing, but I also didn't really know what to do about it. And part of it was due to some, what we now call limiting beliefs that I had, beliefs that led me to say, well, I really don't have a whole lot of options. There are only certain things I know how to do that I can earn a living at, and so I can only do those things, and I don't really enjoy any of them, but, I'm kind of locked in. Limiting beliefs that kept me from expanding my horizons, so to speak. So when you're in that space, that head space, so to speak, of having those beliefs, you really don't see any possibilities. And I think that's probably the thing that holds people back more than anything else, not being able to see the possibilities. So, like when you're dealing with a client who has a similar kind of situation going on, for whatever reason, they're blocking themselves, they can't see the possibilities, how do you help them unblock?
Well, and that becomes the first thing you have to do to unblock, and we've talked about this at length, is get them to adjust their perspective to start. To really get them to believe that this is a new opportunity, instead of looking at the loss or look at, being focused on that. When one of the dynamics when someone loses what they perceived as a career, for example, they have a really hard time processing. And so I actually spend a session or two in the beginning letting them just talk about it, because they need to talk about it. And then at some point, I then try to get them to shift their perspective of, I lost the best job I'll ever have, or I will never get another job like that. Or, those are constant thoughts that are doing, and that's what they're putting out there. And the law of attraction goes, yep, that's right. And that becomes a very direct way of connecting with the law of attraction on what I perceive as a negative view, when you keep putting that narrative out there. But sitting down with a client and walking them through the process and using examples of people who have failed epically and ended up with far more than they ever wanted to do. Nobody ever set out, to go do great things. I do believe everybody sets out to do great things, but great things aren't realized until almost every great accomplishment. If I were to sit down with every great company, every perceived great company, and speak with the CEO or the founder of that company, I would almost guarantee you 99% of them would tell a story of struggle and failure and almost not making it. Yeah. And you hear like Apple. When I think of successful companies, I think of Apple. They whether you like Apple or not, you can't argue with them being a successful, profitable company. And there was a time when Apple was on the edge of bankruptcy. They were almost done.
1990s.
Their stock was pennies, basically. You could have, I won't tell everybody put $1,000 at a certain time and be worth about $10 million now. But it's one of those things that Apple was written off as being done. they had a hard, they were sort of considered just, okay, they're behind the times. And again, that drove Steve, all the people involved within that outlet. It's more than just, Steve Jobs. There's a whole group of people that Apple was believed in it. They moved on. They barely made it, and then they wildly became successful. In most companies, and that's being an extremely large, successful company, but all the way down to small, successful companies. Most people that I know that are independently successful fought through struggle. They fought through the stuff, and they never relented, and they viewed everything as a learning opportunity, and it just became an expected success. And that's what that perspective changes. If you look at life every day in the role of a victim, you will keep inviting more things to be victimized by. If you look at it as I'm a victor and I'm going to be successful, then it can't be anything other than that. There's no other option for it to be. And that's the beauty of it all.
Steve Jobs certainly is a good example to use. I mean, yes, a large number of people played a major role in the turnaround, but I think everybody pretty much agrees Steve Jobs was like at the leadership position. He's the one who led them through it. And the simple fact is, like you said, not only had Apple been struggling and failing, but by that point in time, he wasn't even in the company anymore. He had been kicked out of his own company. He was off doing a thing called Next Computer, which to this day most people don't even know what that is. He was literally in Nowheresville. And then as the company completely started to collapse, he negotiated his way back in and started dreaming again, started creating new ideas. And 10 years later, we had an iPod. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I like about it is again, you hear he was kicked out. He could have said, they stole my dream. They ran my company to the ground. I'm sure he said that at some point, but he didn't quit. And that's the answer. I mean, life will kick your butt. If I don't know anybody that didn't go through something, but your response to it seems to be the difference. And that's the beauty of it to me like the example of valedictorians. I mean, they've done okay. It's not that they're not doing okay, but they're not the ones that are out there achieving greatness. They're the ones that are working for the guys that achieve greatness. I laugh. I believe it was Elon Musk that there was a comment about Harvard and education and stuff like that. And he goes, yes, I'm a very big fan of Harvard. I have several of their people working for me.
Yeah.
It's the perspective of it is, let's go be wildly successful. I look at Oprah Winfrey. This is a woman that has a very difficult background that refused to give up and has an incredible law of attraction perspective that she talks about very openly, and is freakishly successful. I mean, it's just, and everything she touches becomes success. Even things that don't work, she just keeps moving on. I mean, she just she's her own perpetual motion of law of attraction. And I respect that. And it came from her resilience. She is like a dandelion. And that's the dandelions last. They grow. They are the resilient flower, so to speak. And while everybody loves an orchid, I'd rather be the dandelion.
And I can see why. I think we can all see why. It's an amazing thing that the biggest factor, apparently, based on what we're talking about here, in success is persistence. It's just refusing to give up under any circumstance, no matter how bad things get. You're refusing to give up. That's
right.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, you're a psychotherapist.
Yeah, it is, and it's also, to me, it's exciting. One of my favorite stories to hear is I was listening to Jim Carrey. I was never a Jim Carrey fan. I never liked his comedy. I thought he was silly, but I really have grown to like him as a law of attraction practitioner. And he tells of a time he was basically homeless in his car. and maybe actually homeless. I don't know why I said basically. If I remember correctly, didn't have a place to live. And he was just trying to do stand-up in comedy clubs to get his first break, and he knew what he wanted to do. He was talented at what he did. And he used to go in front of, like, he was trying to, I think it was Eddie Murphy, actually. He stood outside of a theater one time watching people go into the Eddie Murphy concert and just say, I would love to be Eddie Murphy. I want to be here. I look what he, and he envisioned himself headlining that. He envisioned that. And as he was becoming successful, he got there. I forget the name of the show, but there was a show on Fox when it was a fledgling network that he got a role in, and he got attention before he started getting movies. And he worked really hard, and he viewed it as, he kept envisioning success. And when his father was ill, and he was on the edge of, he was early success at that point when his father passed away. And he wrote a check, and I think it was for $10 million. Maybe it was $25 million. He put in his father's casket with him and said, in 5 years, this check will be good. And he didn't tell anybody about it. He just did it. He told his dad that, who had passed away. And literally within a week of 5 years to that day, he signed the contract for The Mask 2, which was an incredible thing. And his salary was $35 million. The check was good.
Wow.
And that was written when there was that would be almost unheard of. But again, that's that resilience. This is a man that went from nothing to that. So I look at the most successful people. They don't accept they can't be successful. They just move forward. The oddballs, the ones that don't fit in society, they don't conform. They're the ones that go move forward. They're the ones that really make a difference on the planet. And I just, that's the dandelion. That's and like you're saying, the resilience with the perspective, that's an unbeatable combination. You can't be defeated when you have resilience and you keep that perspective in a forward movement.
And by the way, where Jim Carrey's comedy is concerned, I tend to agree. I mean, I've never really been totally turned on by his comedy, except for one thing. I think it was in The Grinch, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. There was one scene where he starts mimicking Ron Howard, who directed the film. And it was an absolutely brilliant sequence. It had nothing to do with the film, but they left it in because it was so good. It was just hysterically funny. It was watching Ron Howard in a Grinch costume. It was really good.
Well, he is funny. It's just what he found success in, that slapsticky, like Dumb and Dumber. I tried to watch about 9 minutes of Dumb and Dumber and had to stop. But again, it's just not my type of comedy. But at the end of the day, he found what worked and he applied it. He's successful, and it just, and there's countless stories. I look at every leader in industry. I look at almost everyone can tell a story. If I could write a book one day, and Napoleon Hill actually did this, but sort of in a different way, of just interviewing these people who are successful and seeing the non-traditional ways they got there. Yeah, and I don't mean there's people that achieve. I know doctors. I work with a lot of doctors, and they're very traditional. They go through an ungodly amount of school. They open their practice, and most of them do very well. So it isn't that they can't do very well, but it's just none of them are outliers. None of them are way extreme. There's very few of them that make it out there. They might be making $1 million a year. It's great, but they never get out there to where they're just creating. Yeah, they're not the wealthiest people in the world. It's not that. They're wealthy, and they're certainly doing great, but it's not that level that I'm talking about. It's the people that just are willing to take it beyond what society thinks is the answer, and they thrive.
And by the way, doctors are very resilient. Otherwise, they don't become doctors. I mean, first of all, you have to pass organic chemistry. Anybody who can pass organic chemistry is resilient, because that is the most boring subject on the face of the planet. So if you can pass that one, you're doing great. and then you have to jump through all the hoops, not only getting your undergraduate degree and your graduate degree and so forth, but then you have to go on to get the doctor's degree, right? And then once you get that, then you have to become a resident, and then it's just like one thing after another, after another, after another. They have hoop after hoop to jump through, so that does require a certain degree of resilience. But you're right; it's an expected kind of resilience. It's not the out of the box kind of resilience.
Right, and again, it certainly works. And I'm by no means, I'm going to have doctor friends listening saying, "What are you talking about?" I'm certainly not critical. I admire their, like I said, the resilience. I mean, what they do to most doctors in their residency should be criminal. It's ridiculous. And their job is, and part of it is, it's almost like boot camp. Let's weed you out. If you can't handle this, you work ridiculous hours, and they're always with the worst shifts, and they're always in the worst places, and but it builds where they're going, and so from that perspective, it certainly is. But the idea that whatever path we're taking, the beauty and the exciting piece, and what I want our audience to understand is, no matter where you are, at any point in time, you can pivot in the law of attraction to the positive. You can attract. You can be the greatest victim in the entire planet and everything go against you, but instantly you can change your perspective. It can change in a moment's notice, and then your fortunes change in a moment's notice. Most people don't, because it takes a while to do the change, but I have seen, that's why I like working with younger people with the law of attraction concepts, because they have a less of a negative mindset from years. It's not as in sort of in their brain as much for as long, so they're more susceptible to the concepts of the law of attraction because they don't have such a history. Give me a 13 or 14-year-old that really wants to implement this, they're magical in how they do it. Yeah. They do it in a way that, wow, I guess I'm intimidated sometimes how easy they're able to do it and really make it work.
Yeah.
But no matter who you are, you'd be 70 years old and have never been successful, and you can pivot here using these concepts and become successful. You could be, on disability, sitting in your chair going, but this doesn't apply to me. Joel doesn't know my situation. And I'm going, yeah, I do. I mean, I don't know your exact situation, but I promise you, I know people with no legs that have done this. I know people who have had severe brain injuries that have done this. There's no reason that this can't work. And accepting that and then moving forward, it is the gift. It is the anti-victim mode. It's what we place ourselves in. It's such an exciting concept. And once we do it, life changes drastically.
How do you say something, though, to somebody like, you mentioned somebody who, lost their use of their limbs or they had some horrific accident or whatever. How do you look somebody like that in the eye and tell them you're going to turn this around? Because that's a hard one to believe when you have your limbs, when you have all of it going for you. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, fortunately, there's, first of all, in the beginning, you have to approach it in a way, at least I do, that, I can't walk into somebody and just immediately, there has to be some kind of rapport developed where they can start to trust and understand that, okay, that maybe what this guy is saying is true. So if I just simply walk in and boom, here's what we're doing, and they're going to know you're crazy. But as time, there's tons of examples. There are people that, there's one guy, he does motivational speaking. He doesn't have any arms or legs. I don't know if you've ever seen the guy. I forget his name. He's successful. He does great. It's just finding the idea that within us is the success. It's not what's on the outside. The real law of attraction responds to the inside and will overcome whatever obstacle it has to. Again, it's the law. It's gravity. Does gravity say, sorry, since you don't have any legs, I'm not going to pull you to the ground when you fall? No, gravity doesn't care.
It's true.
Gravity will pull you down. It's the law. The law of attraction is a law. It doesn't want you to fail. It doesn't want you to succeed. It doesn't care. It just wants to respond. It just responds to what you are. And if your mindset is, and so once people buy into that, they see examples of that, it changes everything. The guy on the Game of Thrones, the little person or the dwarf, I don't know what the politically accepted term is now, but I can't think of his name. I wish I could. Wildly successful in acting, and he's very much a law of attraction believer. Oh. He just, like you say, I can look at what he looks. I am whatever how tall he is. He said that's not what many actors in Hollywood are. However, he's such a great actor, and he uses that as an advantage. He uses it. He changes it into a whole other perspective. And he's wanted for his acting ability. And they've adapted roles just to make it. I thought it ironic in the movie Infinity Wars. He plays this giant, which I find hilarious. It was a very neat way they filmed it. He's standing by Thor, and he's like 20 times bigger than Thor. And so, but again, it's about where do we find this? Where do we get everything? It's all inside. It's not on the outside. It isn't, I'm cursed, I'm this, and that. The law of attraction, and it responds to your resilience, it doesn't care about the stuff that we think we care about. Well, nothing's gone right for me. And the law of attraction goes, you're right, and it won't anymore, ever, until you change. Everything goes right for me. You're right. It's going to go right for me. That's how simple it works. Not just saying it, but really believing it. And it responds to the emotional vibration that you're putting out, that negative feeling of, I will never have success, or I have these limitations. The law of attraction responds with a resounding, yes, you do. And we'll keep giving them to you. Or I have no limitations, and I can be. And it responds with, "Yes, you're correct. Unlimited opportunity." That's how it is. And people that take advantage. I have a friend that runs treatment centers, and he started out. He's a recovering addict, and he is blind. And he started out as a sort of a peer counselor in a treatment center. And worked his way up to a house manager, then eventually got some credentialing and became a therapist. And eventually, through some hard work and dedication, he became part owner of a treatment center. He owns multiple treatment centers now and is very wealthy. And he did that by accepting. He could be a victim of, I'm blind, I can't do anything, or I have. He views it as an advantage in business now. He has people that obviously have to do stuff for him. He pays people to do that. But at the same time, he sits down with people and he hears people differently because he can't see them. He hears them. He's able to, in his mind, make deals. People underestimate him, and that's one of his greatest strengths, is they underestimate him in business often. And he puts the best people in place. And he's, again, wildly successful, and it's about his perspective of it. He could easily accept money, I'm disabled, I'm this or I'm that, or I can go be wildly successful. He doesn't need to be disabled. Now, and there's a big difference.
Now, there's success in business. There's also success in other areas of life, success in relationships, success with health, success with a variety of things that don't necessarily have anything to do with a job or with a career. The same principle applies, though, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And when I say success, and most people who are listening, or most people in the law of attraction, their initial reaction is financial most of the time. Most of the time they're trying to, I need to change things. So we do tend to focus and talk about that, but I don't want to view success as, financial stuff is just a tiny piece of it. It's easy to say when you have financial success, it's a tiny piece, but if you don't have money to pay the bills, it's a major piece. But when you start looking at success in life, it's about what are you doing? How are you feeling? Like you say, relationships. It's your ability to, enjoy your life, to have the life that you want. What is success with each individual person? That is a different thing. I have an interesting thing. I've been in a relationship with a young lady for a long time. We're not going to get married. We'll never get married. And she's good with that. We're very, it's something in my life that's my situation. That's what I like. That's me. But not everybody goes that way. And it's okay. You got to look at it that way.
It's true. Yeah.
Not meeting anybody else's expectation or living a life that other people expect. And I actually answered this question the other day, and I got several emails. I was doing a friend's podcast, and he interviewed me, and he said, you've done all this great stuff. You adopted kids, and and he knows my significant other, and said, you're in a great relationship with the, but how come you're not married? And I said, well, that's probably $1 million question that, I've made a joke of it, and he kept coming back to it. And I said, well, the answer is probably not going to sit well, but I'm going to say it what I believe. I said, I personally, and I'm just speaking me personally, have never seen a relationship in marriage that I thought I would want. Ooh. And he was like, "Oh, really?" Yeah, I said, I just, and maybe it's because the field that I'm in, and I see what I see is usually a lot of stuff that is like, wow. But that's just me personally. Mm-hmm. And I know other people that say the other side. So I'm completely great with the other side. But you're asking me? No, I've never seen a marriage, and I'll be like, oh my God, thank God for that. That's a wonderful situation. And again, that's my individual perspective. Yep. And that's the difference between people that makes it. And it's okay. And I have dear friends that are very happily married. And when I said, one guy who had heard me say that before, he goes, well, what about my marriage? I have a great marriage. I'm great. I'm super glad that's great for you. But he doesn't quite understand what, I wouldn't want to, I love the concept. For me, these are things that are very important to me. This is talking about the differences of success. If Friday night I want to get on a plane and go to Florida for a week, that's what I want to do. If I want to go work out at 10 o'clock at night, that's what I want to do. And, I've come very much to, I love the independence and the flexibility of being single. It's a great thing for me. Mm. And that other people don't value that. I like, being a parent. I actually think, especially dealing with kids that have had some issues, being a dad, I think it can be a better scenario when you don't have competing ideas, when you can have, when you don't have the debate between parents of what's the right thing to do. I think sometimes it's a clearer message from a single parent if it's done properly. So there's advantages. I just choose to look at the advantage. It's not negative toward marriage. It's what I personally believe. Success is an individual definition. So whether it's relationships or business or no matter what you're looking at, it's what you believe. Do you believe you're successful? Are you happy? All that stuff. That's the beauty of all of this, Walt. And that's what I love about the law of attraction. It keeps us really open to everything.
Yeah, sure. Now, I want to kind of go off in a slightly different direction here. And there's actually two different prongs on this direction. One prong is a lot of people, especially if they're looking at LOA for the first time, will tend to bring out the extreme cases. Well, what about this? Well, what about that, right? So, what about somebody who's got a dread disease and they've got 6 months to live, and how's the law of attraction going to help them with that? So that's one of the prongs. Another prong is more along the lines of, well, what can I do, rather than being just plain skeptical. I'm facing this enormous barrier in front of me. I can't see any way around it. Why should I start believing that there's a way around this?
Well, one of the, right back to that same thing, the perspective. I'll start with the barrier question. I have this, and I look at it like, has there ever been anyone to get out of the situation or overcome the situation that you're in? And I'm unaware of anyone that can say, yes, I'm sure there has been. So there's precedence that this can happen. So if you start with there's precedence, then you have a choice to pursue I want to go after that. I think I can do that. As I said, there was a time in my life, Walt, where I was facing felony criminal charges. I owed $250,000 in credit card debt. I was homeless. My family wasn't speaking to me. My fiance had dumped me. I didn't have a car. I had nothing. That is an insurmountable situation. I cannot imagine getting out through that. There's no way.
And yet you did.
But here I am.
Yeah.
I did. And so you start with it's been done. And you start with, what's the best way to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You start walking through people through little successes. You start helping them have little victories, and the little victories become bigger victories and become bigger victories. So no matter what you're facing, there is a way. Now, is it going to, here's another way to look at it. And I'll use this example sort of on the same time. I'm facing a felony criminal charge. I may go to jail. This was many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I went to jail. Now, did I get away from that? No, I went to jail. And so if my goal was I can't handle jail, that I had to do. But my response to that is the answer, Walt. I can't stop everything from happening. The law of attraction will not allow you, or doesn't give you it doesn't allow you to escape consequences. It doesn't allow you not to be responsible. It allows you to overcome what you do. It allows you to overcome the slips in life. It allows you there's no one that can't recover from anything. And that sort of tails into that first one you're talking about. I have this disease and stage 4 liver cancer, and the doctors can't do anything. I'm going to die. And I'm not saying that, that might not be the case. It may be too late. However, there are people who, after they've been given their final diagnosis, they have 6 months to live, decide to mentally attack it, use the law of attraction. There's multiple cases out there of people who have overcome incurable diseases for no explanation. A lot of people say, like, I know some people say, well, they go on an all green diet, or they do this, whatever. It's whatever they do. It's the body responding to it. They're believing it's working. The mind, there are people who believe, doctors who believe. In fact, I talked to a cancer doctor the other day, and he says at some point in our lives, everybody has quote unquote cancer in their body.
Mm-hmm.
But the body defeats it. The immune system kills it. It's when the immune system gets off or whatever that it can't. So the concept that we all at some point have something, but you don't know it. You don't know the body said, oh, there's a little tumor growing there. Let's just kick its butt. It does that all the time. And that is such an amazing gift, that the body has the ability to do it. That's the thing. That's what matters.
And that perspective does help you change. I see a lot. I've been paying attention on Facebook and in the Facebook groups about LOA. I see a lot of people who, how do you describe it? They're trying to use the law of attraction to make things happen within their limited expectations. I know that doesn't sound it doesn't sound like it makes any sense at all. But let me give a concrete example, and maybe you'll see what I mean. I've seen in the last week probably 4 or 5 different people who are clearly they're in college or in high school, but usually it's in college. And they're posting something along the lines of, I haven't studied my subject, but I need to get a good grade. Can the law of attraction get me a good grade? So they're saying, I am limited by my beliefs. I am limited by what I'm willing to do, but I want the law of attraction to perform some magic.
Right. That is such a frustrating play. First of all, it's like we were talking about the asking the law of attraction to provide magic is like asking gravity again to provide magic.
Mm.
Gravity, please don't apply right now. Well, sorry, gravity has never not done that.
That's true.
It always applies.
Yep.
It every day is consistent. It applies the exact same thing. It's absolutely the exact same thing. The law of attraction, can it get you a good grade? Can it do that? In the bigger, when you're stuck on, I have a test coming up, I haven't studied, I haven't turned in my homework, I'm unprepared in the test tomorrow, and I need the law of attraction to work. Never seen it work that way, ever. Period.
And I have to say, I don't even understand the perspective, because why are you even pursuing the grade? Why are you even pursuing the goal of the degree if you don't want to know it?
Right.
I don't understand that.
But if somebody came to me with that exact scenario, that's a perfect example, Walt. I would start by reframing their thought process. I would start by saying, look, we're not this test tomorrow or next week. I'm not saying don't try hard, blah, 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 and all that, but it's irrelevant. We got to readjust your thinking. What are you trying to do here? Are you after a grade, or are you after the information? What are you doing it for? We have to adjust how you're viewing this whole concept. What are you after? It's about success. Is success to you this, or is success to you that? We have to redefine what success is, or at least help them see what their goals are. The concept why are you taking the class? What are you doing about it? So if you're taking a class and you're solely worried about the grade and not we have to adjust your desire to learn. As you know, I'm working on a doctorate in metaphysics. Well, I have a 99.8 something %, and I still believe I'm right on that one question I missed. Several months ago, I know I'm right, but it doesn't matter. I'm not doing it for the grade, Walt. I'm passionate about the subject. I didn't take the class, a very difficult class, to worry about the grade. I took it because I wanted. What's the point? If you readjust that, and most people, and one of the reasons I don't do most of the law of attraction things on Facebook is because of stuff like that. They're missing the point, and it gets to the other side, and then they end up. I find it ironic. Then they have these very, very negative fights inside the law of attraction group. It's hilarious, actually.
Oh yeah.
And you're watching this going, okay, the whole point's been missed here, because there's understanding what you're after is what the big concept is. There's a doctor, and I forget where he is. I'm going to look this up because I want to include this in my next book. But and I'll tell you why it makes sense in going backwards and forwards. There's a doctor that was researching this very rare form of cancer, and I'm talking rare. Very few people in the world get it. And he was written a letter many years ago by a mom whose son had this very rare form of cancer, and nobody was researching it because not enough people get it, and so it didn't really require a lot of it. So for some reason, he wanted to make that his passion, and he studied it, and it was very rare, and they can find no commonalities of genetic. There's no reason why people get this that he could figure it out. But again, like 10 people a year get this in the world. More people win the lottery twice in a year than get this disease. So with all this processing, he figured out randomly he gets this same disease, and he dies within 3 months. That's a very odd. What brought that to him? Was it his attraction to it? Did he attract that disease?
Sure sounds like it.
And yeah, and so and again, if your family were to have me live, this is by no means being critical of the man. I find it fascinating that he was diagnosed with this disease and died from it, because his thought process. So if it works that way, it works the other way. And ironically, most people would be willing to, especially early in the skeptical look at the law of attraction, most people would hear that story and go, well, I can believe he thought about it and created it. Well, if you can think about it and create it, you can think about health and create it. As long as you're breathing, there's an opportunity to live. There's an opportunity to be the dandelion. When they spray a dandelion with poison, they generally keep living, or at least they come back. The roots are still there. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the concept here in life of Yes, and people, I always tell people, follow your doctor. I am not a medical doctor. I'm not an oncologist. I want you to follow what your doctor's saying. I believe an equal part of this, if not a more important part of this, is your perspective and thought of what the treatment's doing. There's an actress who you may remember, Valerie Harper.
Oh, yeah.
Very famous actor, Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Mm-hmm.
In 2013, she was diagnosed with a very rare cancer that created the brain hemorrhages and all this stuff. And she was given 3 months to live. That was it. She'd been on chemo. There's nothing else they can do.
Yep.
It was over. She's thriving right now, alive and well. 3 years later, she's in better health than she was then. She doesn't have cancer anymore.
That's really something.
It really, all she did was she ate right, exercised, and changed her perspective. And she talks about it. Law of attraction. Again, this is somebody that's well known. You can do a quick Google search and pull this up. That's what I did during our talk. That's why I knew the year.
Right.
But it's there. It's all there. I mean, it's amazing stuff that somebody given 3 months to live, and she didn't accept that, and she's thriving at this point.
Perspective,
this is really good stuff.
Perspective is an amazing thing, and we only have a few minutes left, so we can't spend a lot more time on it. But I want to bring up one more thing, and that is, I see a pattern that happens continuously, and that pattern is there is a very small percentage of people who, when faced with difficulties, will choose a positive perspective. The overwhelming majority will choose a negative perspective, and usually it's a critical perspective. And if it involves the law of attraction, usually it's a critical perspective of the law of attraction. So basically they set themselves up because they never actually take the time and make the effort to get themselves into a positive perspective about whatever thing it is that they're dealing with. And I don't know if that we can cover that in a minute and a half, but cover that in a minute and a half.
Well, it does have, we as society have a tendency to look at the negative, what doesn't work. And there was a recent article that after all these years, for 3,000 years, acupuncture has been accepted as an effective method to treat pain. A recent study says, no, it isn't. It doesn't work. And wow, that's sort of shocking, huh? Acupuncture doesn't work?
Yeah.
Well, it does if you believe it, and it doesn't if you don't. And that's the $1 million answer for everything. Most of the pills we take have a placebo effect. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, we are the placebo. That's the name of his book. We are the cure. We are the answer. We are the answer to these things. So a critical perspective of law of attraction is based on what society does. Let's take a negative critical view and tear it apart. The law of attraction does not work. Then you're absolutely right. The law of attraction says you're right. We don't work. We're not here. It doesn't work for you. That's what it gives. And it will continue with your negative. And that's the beauty. When you realize it's all inside of you. And instinctively, most people, when they really give it a chance, really can start to do that. But you have a lot of societal pushback that, no, you're not responsible. It's not your fault. You're not having to do this. We get back to that whole blame thing. And the law of attraction didn't work for me. No, the law of attraction worked perfectly for you. You weren't working the law of attraction. There's a difference. And, that negative, and I know real briefly, I have a friend that is on Facebook, and he recently posted that he was facing some real difficult health issues. Well, this guy's very negative. And my first reaction when I saw that, I go, that's not shocking. And I mean in a bad way. Yeah. I really hope he can turn it around. But his perspective is always negative. I know we're out of time, so I can't keep going.
Yeah, but still very, very, very insightful. You did very well considering you only had a minute and a half, I have to say.
Yeah, I could have kept going forever.
But we'll pick this up again next week. We actually get you for 2 days next week, so we'll talk again on Wednesday. Sound good?
That'd be great, buddy.
All right, and we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.